President Joe Biden addresses the administration's efforts to protect the climate during his State of the Union address. Plus, a study making the case against electric vehicles. It's getting some attention. Could EVs be worse for the environment than previously thought? We'll take a look. And scientists are working on a new method to make lithium-ion batteries from an unlikely source. Why you may not want to toss your empty peanut shells in the trash. Hello and welcome to EarthX News, where we focus on sustainability, conservation, and the environment. I'm Christina Thompson. Let's get into some of the biggest headlines facing our planet. President Joe Biden touted his investments into addressing climate change and the push to transition to clean energy during his State of the Union address. During the speech, Biden ditched the term climate change, instead calling what's happening to the planet the climate crisis.
I'm taking the most significant action ever on climate in the history of the world. I'm cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs, like the IBEW work is building and installing 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations.
Though Biden did not mention the Inflation Reduction Act by name, he did discuss how its funding pushed for renewable energy and created more jobs. The act is responsible for some $370 billion in wind, solar, and renewables. The president also mentioned his commitment to conserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. He designated 5 new national monuments, safeguarding over 1.5 million acres. However, it has been more than 200 days since his last designation of a new national monument. A new study claims electric vehicles release more toxic emissions and are actually worse for the environment than gas-powered cars. The op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal cited a 2022 study by emissions data firm Emissions Analytics. According to the study, brakes and tires on EVs release more than 1,800 times more particle pollution compared to modern tailpipes, which have more efficient exhaust filters that have brought gas-powered vehicles' emissions to new lows. Most vehicle-related pollution today comes from tire wear. As heavy cars drive on light-duty tires, which are often created with synthetic rubber made from crude oil and other fillers and additives, they deteriorate and release harmful chemicals into the air. The average EV is about 30% heavier, so brakes and tires on battery-powered cars wear out faster than standard vehicles. The firm behind the study described the current state of EVs as a trade-off. While EVs are reducing CO2, they could be increasing particle pollution due to brake and tire wear. California's Air Resources Board might have come up with a solution, saying automakers could offset the weight of heavy batteries with, quote, weight reduction in other components or the vehicle body. Think twice before throwing those peanut shells away. Scientists developed a new method for producing lithium-ion batteries, and get this, they're using peanut shells. Here's how it works. Lithium-ion batteries feature 2 electrodes with opposite polarities, one positively charged, the other one negatively. The majority of the negative charge in lithium-ion batteries are currently made using carbon-based materials such as graphite, silicon, or a combination of both. But there are safety concerns with using some raw materials in batteries, like graphite, which also is known to have poor capacity. Peanut shells offer the possibility of a safer, more efficient, and less expensive solution. Plus, using peanut shells, which would normally just be thrown away, also helps to cut down on food waste. It's a win-win. A new technology aiming to reduce industrial emissions is catching the eye of some of the world's biggest investors. As companies seek fossil fuel-free methods to manufacture construction materials like steel, cement, and chemicals, major financiers are backing a promising heat-storing battery technology to address this challenge. Groups such as BlackRock, Saudi Aramco, and Rio Tinto are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into startups developing thermal batteries, which use renewable energy to heat up solid blocks of carbon, rocks, or molten salt. Some wild winter weather across the central United States made history this year, but not because it was cold. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the month of February came in as the 3rd warmest on record after a stint of summer-like temperatures swept across several states near the end of last month. States like Nebraska and Iowa saw temperatures in the mid-70s. That's about 40 degrees above average for this time of year. While cities in the South, such as Dallas, Texas, sizzled in the mid-90s. Veteran Weather Channel meteorologist Jim Cantori posted about the unseasonably warm weather on social media, saying, quote, "The fact that we have had 132 February all-time record highs is just insane." Forecasters said it was difficult to link the remarkable weather pattern to human-induced climate change, but such extremes were becoming more frequent because of warming temperatures around the globe. Scientists say the seasonal El Niño weather pattern, in which the waters of the eastern Pacific Ocean heat up, is also contributing to the unusual weather. Some scientists are looking to update the way hurricanes are classified. Calls for a new Category 6 are growing after a recent study suggested the existing scale may no longer accurately represent a hurricane's intensity in light of rising ocean temperatures. Currently, the National Weather Service uses the Saffir-Simpson scale to measure a hurricane's strength, which can range from a Category 1 to 5. Now, a Category 5 hurricane is a storm with wind speeds of 157 miles per hour or greater. But some researchers propose creating a new scale in which storms with winds over 192 miles per hour would be classified as Category 6. Recently, we spoke with Brian McNulty, Senior Research Associate at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School. Here's that conversation. With hurricane season fast approaching, based on trends, what can we expect this year?
This year, we're looking at probably an active season, though, just given the already record warm ocean temperatures that are out there in the Atlantic. It looks like those will maintain being abnormally warm. And then we're also looking for a transition from El Nino to La Nina, and that also has an influence to increase Atlantic hurricane activity.
When we talk about hurricanes, many times we bring up the level of strength, levels 1 to 5. Can you elaborate on these categories and what exactly they mean for people who might be living in these communities who are at greater risk for hurricane season?
Certainly. So the rating assigned to a storm is based only on its peak intensity of wind, peak wind speed somewhere in the storm, which in a hurricane would be near the center, near the eye wall.
And now they're thinking of adding another category, a Category 6. What brought discussions up about potentially adding a new category to be able to incorporate some of these really intense storms that we've seen in recent years?
Yeah, there was a paper recently that mentioned that there's an increasing number of storms around the world that could reach this higher threshold, because as you mentioned at the start, the Category 5 bin it has a lower limit of 157 miles per hour, but there is no upper limit, so it's just that plus. So a Category 6 would no longer mean that the Category 5 isn't open-ended, but Category 6 would now be open-ended and start at a much higher number. There's a few storms in the world that would qualify for this. And I don't think the authors of the paper are really proposing that we add this. It's just kind of to point out that things are changing, and we're seeing these storms that, more and more of them would start to fall into this higher category rating.
In your opinion, is it necessary?
No, I don't think so. In a practical sense, the Saffir-Simpson scale is only used in the East Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. And in those, there's only one storm that ever would have met the qualification to be a Category 6. That was Hurricane Patricia in 2015 in the East Pacific. No Atlantic storm to this date would qualify as a Category 6 still. But even if the rest of the world used the Saffir-Simpson scale, it's such a small percentage of storms that would reach this. Around the world, only about 5% of hurricanes are Category 5s. So, you would split that up into a much smaller slice. But I think in the sense as it relates to us, who are, occasionally hit by hurricanes, it doesn't really do anything to improve the communication of the storms and what threats they pose to people. By the time you're at a Category 5, it's extremely bad, things getting leveled, no power, no clean water, et cetera, et cetera. So a Category 6 is not going to really add information to that in terms of how you would prepare or evacuate. It would be the same. So it doesn't change the communication of the risk to people.
That does lead me into my next question, because as opposed to trying to fit these storms into a perfect category wrapped up in a tiny box, should we be focusing on things instead of this, like the hazards, evacuation, letting people know about storm surge, things like that?
Absolutely. It's like you read my mind. Yeah, the greatest criticism of the Saffir-Simpson scale is that it is just a number that represents one aspect of a hurricane in one tiny part of a hurricane. It's just the peak wind in the eye wall. The other hazards, like rainfall, which kills a lot of people, the surge, as you mentioned, is very impactful also. It's very important that people appreciate and recognize those hazards at least more than the wind. I mean, the wind actually kills less people than those hazards do. But that's what the Saffir-Simpson scale revolves around, is the wind. So yeah, it definitely has a weakness there.
Great intel. Brian McNulty, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Coming up, a recent study takes a look at the health of the world's forests. Plus, some new research finds certain types of trees are the best at reducing pollution. Stay tuned, those stories are just ahead. A new study reveals the best trees for reducing air pollution. Research from the University of Surrey shows that evergreen trees with smaller leaves are more efficient at removing air pollution. Of the 10 trees in the study, they discovered that the yew tree, or the Taxus baccata, was the plant that removed the most air pollution. Different varieties of the yew can be found around the globe, including the subspecies found on the Pacific West Coast, Taxus baccata brevifolia, which is the original source of Taxol, a cancer-fighting drug. The European yew subspecies has slightly broader needles, which have the ability to capture more urban pollution due to the fact that their surfaces are rough. The study found that stomata, the pores of the leaf, could help plants catch particles. It's how trees absorb various pollutants such as carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and particulate matter, filtering these harmful substances from the air. Researchers also found the most effective leaf types were owl-shaped, found on Japanese cedar and Lawson cypress. Let's go plant those trees. And speaking of planting trees, recent reporting from the World Bank finds forest areas in several countries, including the US, are sprouting up. A look at that data finds America, alongside India, have planted enough forests that they would cover Bangladesh in an unbroken canopy of leaves. Great Britain has nearly 3 times as much forests as it did at the start of the 20th century. China's forests have increased about 607,000 square kilometers since 1992. And the European Union has added an area equivalent to the size of Cambodia to its woodlands. That report comes as additional research finds the world's trees have sucked about 200 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere from 2011 to 2020. Researchers say that number is only a fraction of the 53.8 billion tons of greenhouse gases emitted in 2022. But industry analysts suggest it may be a sign the world's woodlands might be in better shape than we think, despite numerous reports of global deforestation due to wildfires and logging. Joining us now to discuss is Congressman Bruce Westerman, chairman of the U.S. House Committee on Natural Resources.
Well, good to be with you, Christina, and kudos on your Latin pronunciations and your leaf physiology there. You were doing a great job.
I'm trying. I really am. Difficult words there. I want to talk about this reforestation, though. What does this reporting tell us about the health of our world's forests? Is it all doom and gloom, or is it looking brighter?
I think overall, the world's forests are looking brighter. We've still got a lot of work we need to do. But you highlighted here in the U.S. how our forests are much better. We have more forest land than we had. Even in 1900, there's more forest here today. And that's because of the conservation efforts that we've done here in the U.S. I'm not surprised by the report that you cited because there has been a concerted effort around the world to create more forest, and we just need to make those forests healthier, especially here in the U.S.
So we are seeing more forests, but I think another problem that we run into is just preserving those forests. So what can be done in order to keep them around?
Well, I'm going to call a technical foul here on the word preserve because we can't really preserve our forests. We can conserve them, but they're living, active organisms. And when we try to preserve them, we get into trouble. And that's been a mindset that has caused our forests not to be healthy. Forests continually grow and they compete for light, they compete for water and nutrients. And if you have a hands-off approach, the forest is just going to become limited on one of those resources, and then the trees are going to start competing. They get weak, disease and insects come in, and we end up with catastrophic wildfire. If we will work with nature and manage the forest, do controlled burns, do thinning, utilize the resource that we've got, we can have much healthier forest, and they will stay around a lot longer.
All right, Congressman, any final thoughts on reforestation, what we've spoken about today?
We focus a lot on reforestation, but we should also focus on taking care of the forests that we have. And overall, we're not doing a great job of that on our public lands, and that's why I continue to propose legislation and ideas to allow our land managers to go in and at a local level do what's best for the forest in those areas. We've lost 20% of our giant sequoia trees because we failed to manage those forests. And in the failure of management, we actually made a choice to exclude fire from an ecosystem that demands fire. And as a result, they became overgrown, and we saw wildfires in giant sequoias that we thought we would never see. So that's kind of the poster child of how not to do forest management and a call to do it better. And that's something that I work on every day here in Washington to make sure that our federal lands are going to be better in the future.
Congressman Westerman, thanks for what you're doing in Washington and for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Christina. Good to be with you.
Coming up, a campaign is underway in one South American country to curb the illegal trade of animals. Stay tuned. We'll have more on that story when we return. The North American wolverine could make a return to the mountains of Colorado. State lawmakers recently proposed a bill aiming to reintroduce the threatened species after the local population went extinct in the early 1900s due to unregulated trapping and poisoning. That's according to Rocky Mountain Wild, a nonprofit group supporting the bill. The legislation effort, if passed, would allow Colorado Parks and Wildlife to begin a multi-year reintroduction process. The federal government listed the wolverine as a threatened species last November. Wildlife officials say wolverines are the largest species in the weasel family and weigh around 40 pounds. Ecuador's government is spearheading an effort to combat the illegal trade of animals. Tomas Santolin has more.
South American nation Ecuador has a problem. It risks suffering new restrictions on the lucrative global fishing market if it doesn't crack down on illegal shark fin fishing by the end of March.
One of the serious problems we have in Ecuador is the trafficking of shark fins.
Shark fins catch a high price, especially in Asia.
Supposedly in the Asian market, apart from its demand as food, it has alleged healing and medical powers which encourage the trafficking.
Ecuador is calling in help from the U.S. Agency for International Development and the World Conservation Society.
Illegal wildlife trafficking and trade is the fourth largest illicit business worldwide and is linked to transnational organized crime and delinquency.
Ecuadorian police just rescued this rare margay, one of the most common pelts in the illegal skin trade. At the core of illegal wildlife trafficking is a rapidly expanding global demand for bushmeat, traditionally Eastern medicine ingredients, exotic pets and jewelry, and furs from exotic wildlife, often taken from the rich Amazon region. Authorities report that all of Ecuador's ecosystems are affected by various kinds of wildlife crime. They're hoping the new Stop campaign will beef up enforcement to preserve the country's priceless flora and fauna. For EarthX, I'm Tomás Santolin.
Tomás Santolin, thank you. And before we leave you, an incredibly rare sighting leaves a group of scientists stunned. The team of researchers with the New England Aquarium in Boston said they spotted a gray whale, a species that vanished from the Atlantic Ocean more than 200 years ago, swimming in the waters off Massachusetts in early March. According to a news release, aquarium scientists say they were flying about 30 miles south of Nantucket when they saw the aquatic mammal repeatedly diving and resurfacing while appearing to feed. The aquarium says gray whales are regularly spotted in the waters off the North Pacific Ocean and disappeared from the Atlantic Ocean in the 18th century. However, scientists added in the last 15 years, there have been 5 gray whale sightings in the Atlantic and Mediterranean waters, including off the coast of Florida at the end of last year. Some scientists are attributing these possible new migration patterns to warming sea temperatures. They say in recent years, the Northwest Passage, a sea route connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans through the islands of northern Canada in the Arctic Ocean, has been regularly ice-free during the summer months, allowing gray whales into areas the species hasn't roamed in centuries. That's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Christina Thompson.